All we've tried to do always is do everything the best we possibly can. Never compromise. Even when the customer's like, I can't afford to do that, we just do it anyway and don't charge them. It's just a terrible business plan.
Yes, that's exactly kind of how we got started.
Yeah.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an IRONCLAD original. I am Josh Henning.
I'm Phil Gerber.
I'm Jeremy Gerber.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an IRONCLAD original. Today's guest in the studio, in flesh and blood, all the way from, way over there.
England.
Way over there, across the pond. In studio, co-founder of Retropower, Callum Seviour.
Yeah, bang on.
Seviour, all right. I got it right the first time.
Nailed it.
Questioned myself. All the way out of Leicestershire.
No, you fucked that up.
Yeah, you murdered that.
Well, how is it?
Leicestershire. It doesn't look like that at all.
It's just like it's pronounced.
Yeah.
No, Leicestershire.
Yeah. The Americans are notorious for not getting the shires right. I don't blame you because it doesn't look anything like Leicestershire. But
now it does. Yeah. I took 4 of the letters out, and now it does. Leicestershire, UK, where he heads up the Design Department of Retropower. Retropower specializes in building high-end bespoke restomods. Their facilities offer a comprehensive approach, offering design, engineering, sheet metal fabrication, paintwork, and vehicle construction services. You can learn more at retropower.co.uk. Follow them on Instagram at retropowercars, and subscribe to their YouTube channel at retropowercars. That was a mouthful.
You nailed it.
Callum, welcome to Oil and Whiskey.
thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, how long have you been here? I know you came over for a little trip, didn't you?
Yeah. We've been a week, and this is our last day, actually.
Last day.
Yeah, we're flying back tomorrow afternoon, I think it is. So we flew to Miami Sunday, I think it was, to go to the Daytona 500. So we went Miami, drove up to Melbourne, I think it was, which was just a place halfway to Daytona. Mm-hmm. And then, Daytona 500, stayed in Daytona. The 500 was awesome.
Was that your first NASCAR race?
Yeah. I mean,
did it live up to everything like the American stereotype is?
Exactly.
You got to understand, NASCAR it's a little highbrow than what you're used to, right? So I know you guys probably have the F1 and stuff like that, but NASCAR, we
all that terrible motorsport like F1.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it was exactly what I was expecting. I'm not like an oval racing fan. I just wanted the atmosphere, the noise. I knew what it was going to be like, and it lived up to it. It was perfect.
Yeah,
it was just exactly what I wanted. Like,
so this is America.
Drinking cheap beer with loads of noisy people with V8s flying by, and it's what I wanted. I wouldn't go again, but it's what I wanted to do. It was great. And then,
you got to do Talladega next.
Yeah,
Talladega's that's the real highbrow. That's where we take it up a notch. Yeah.
Then where do we go after that? It's basically been coming here, in all honesty. The rest of the trip was all about coming here. So I think we went Atlanta, Nashville, Indianapolis. So we went to the Indianapolis Speedway Museum.
Awesome.
And then here, and then we're flying back tomorrow.
You get a little closer, just if you don't mind. You can move around, get comfortable, do whatever you want. Well, that's awesome, man. You've seen at least most of the East Coast and Midwest, then.
Yeah.
On a little snap.
Yeah. It's been really good. It's like a massive bucket list motorsport year for me this year, because we've done Daytona 500, went to Indianapolis. There wasn't anything on, but I just wanted to be there. And then we're doing the Le Mans Classic in June, which is the 100th anniversary of 100 years since the first Le Mans 24-hour. Which is going to be a huge event.
Yeah.
And we're doing the Goodwood Festival of Speed, which you've probably heard of, which is also awesome event. I've been before.
Everybody's bucket list over here.
That's on our bucket list, for sure.
So that's this year. And a customer of mine messaged me whilst I've been here saying, do you fancy doing SEMA this year? And I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know if I've got the stamina.
I was going to ask you that next, if you're going to round it
I've done SEMA. We did SEMA in 2019. 19 it was, just before COVID went crazy. And it was really good. That lived up to my expectations massively as well. Loads of your cars here, which was good to see as well. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Well, man, take us to the beginning. We just met today. I'll have to be honest, when Chris set this up and said y'all were coming out, did a little research. You know, I'd heard your name, seen you around Instagram and stuff like that, but didn't know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing some digging over the last few weeks, whatever. I'm quite impressed. You do some.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll get into all that.
That means a lot coming from you.
Before we do, tell us kind of where it all got started over there.
It got started in 2009 in terms of a business. My brother and I have just messed around with cars for as long as I can remember. He's 5 years older, so he was always the one who influenced me.
He looks way younger. Maybe it's the camera.
How dare you? So we've always just tinkered with machines, not even cars, like machines. We'd be taking lawnmowers apart and tuning them up and, just messing with anything with a petrol engine generally. And then 2009, we basically had this conversation, which was, should we rent a unit and see if we could make a basic living messing around with cars? And that's what we did. So we got this small unit, which I now realise was good fortune in that it was just one part of a much bigger building with other businesses and the other units. We were just doing anything we could do. So welding up rusty wheel arches on old cars and doing whatever we could do to make a few pounds. And then I'd say it was a year in, so 2010, we were approached to do our first kind of full build project, so bare metal shell to finished turnkey car, which was an Opel Ascona. It was an Opel Ascona 400, which is kind of a Group B homologation car, but this was a replica of one. And we did that build, finished it in 2011. That then got taken to a lot of shows. That generated a lot more interest, and kind of things started to take off from there. And we got to a position where we were quite quickly doing almost exclusively full builds, sort of bare metal shell to turnkey car builds.
Well, before we go too much further, I'm interested in this part of it because we talk about this quite a bit, and we get this question a lot from up-and-comers and guys that are just starting out or haven't started out, they're wanting to, or they have been in business for a year or two, and they're looking for that big thing, right? They're looking for that break, or they're looking for what do I do to put myself on the map? So you said y'all both took the leap and said, we're going to do this, and you took what came in, right?
Yeah.
And, repairing rusty wheel arches, those were wheel wells. I'm going to start doing a little bit of, you said pounds too, so that's dollars here.
Yeah. I can talk about bonnets and boots.
So, but then you get approached by this customer, to do this full wild build. A couple of things. One, why do you think he approached you at that point in time without really a great large body work? Sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes it's friendship. Sometimes they see something in you. Sometimes they're like, I think I can get them to do a pretty damn good job for cheap because they're not
trying
well
to make
known.
a name, yeah,
Right. I'm going to be the one that makes them. So there's something to dig in there. But also, how much further did you go time, labor, and effort-wise than what you probably got paid for?
Oh, way further. I mean, I don't think my brother and I took more than about £500, that's dollars, a month for the first 5 years of our business. We put in, we were probably only charging half the hours we were actually doing. Going back to what you were saying about how we got that first kind of full build, it was a combination of things. I think media was one. We were probably a little bit ahead of the general kind of car restoration scene in terms of media coverage. So in 2009, when we started, I was like, well, we've got to show everybody what we're doing. So we got Facebook pages for all our different projects. This was before Instagram, and YouTube wasn't really kind of as big as it is now. So we were literally photographing everything we were doing, and it's actually something that I've always admired about you guys, is the level of detail you show. And there's very few people that do that. Everybody's like, here's the shit car at the beginning. Oh, look at this amazing car at the end. Yeah, but you can make a car look amazing in a finished picture, even when it's pretty bad. In a picture, my shiny paint job looks great. You know,
There's a lot of
what's
movie
underneath
cars
it?
that we can see in person.
Exactly. So we showed a lot of detail. That was probably the one thing. And then I think that led to this particular person coming to see us, and then I think meeting us. Perhaps I guess we sold ourselves well, and that I suppose was the big break. And then that carried on it. And all we've tried to do always is do everything the best we possibly can. Never compromise, even when the customer's like, I can't afford to do that. We just do it anyway and don't charge them. It's just a terrible business plan.
That's exactly kind of how we got started. We built our first car, and nobody was really doing anything. Like, even most companies didn't have an internet website at that point. This was before Facebook and Instagram. I made a website, put a bunch of pictures of the car that we built on there, and then Barry saw that, found us based on our website that was horrible at the time, but it was one of like 3 websites in the industry, and he came to us to build the car. And then same thing, we're working on it. I don't think my brother even had a time card when he was punching in, so almost all of his time was donated and free to build this car to then get our name out there. But
at that point in time, you didn't even have to worry about search engine optimization, right? Because if you just searched hot rod, there was just like 3. There was 3 of them on there.
As long as AOL didn't disconnect while you were logging on.
And dial up.
We kind of same idea. We just wanted to show everything because we figured same deal. You could see all the details and how we did it, and you're not hiding anything. You're showing the level of workmanship that goes into every area of the car, not just like Josh said. Started out with a rusty shell. Here it is, done, and what looks like it could be beautiful.
So we had no idea of where it was going to go. We just wanted to work on cars, and it seemed the obvious thing to do to show people what you were doing in detail, because we were proud of what we were doing. That was what it came down to. We weren't even thinking of it from a marketing point of view, really. We just thought, we're really proud of this. Let's show it off to people. And that really is what led to that work. And then it was the same deal. So when we did that first full build, we showed everything in massive detail, and that led to more people wanting the same sort of thing. And 2011, so 2 years after we started, the business next to us moved out, so we took their unit on. 2013, second business on that site moved out. We took their unit.
Were they moving out at just about the appropriate time that you needed?
Yeah, by chance.
Stage that way.
Yeah. And then
it's funny how
2
years.
2 years ago, we took the final unit in the building we're in, and I can see you've got exactly the same thing. That momentarily for this like dream window, you're like, wow, we've got the dream workshop, and then about 2 weeks later, you're like, we need more space.
So you did the tour then. So
Yeah.
Chris take you over to our second
He
location?
did, and I really felt for you when he said about the fact that then you found out too late that place came up for sale, and you missed the opportunity to have the whole of that building, it looks like the dream place for you guys.
Yeah, it would have been ideal.
And I just remind you of that.
But all of that there was in the back corner of this shop in July of this year. So 6 months ago.
Just insane. It's just absolutely insane. Yeah. And we're kind of at that. It's not, the market in the UK isn't as big, so the growth is definitely slower, but I can see the progression, laid out in front of us, and we need a bigger place already. But you guys have actually inspired a lot of that. It was 20. We didn't really. We've seen like Boyd Coddington and American Hot Rod and loved all of that stuff, but we were just working on whatever cars we could get our hands on. And then it was only around probably, I think 2013, I came across your guys' website and started looking at the projects you were doing. And I was like, this is just insane. Like this level of detail, I want to do that. And we're now at the point, probably, I guess that many years ago, 10 years ago, where we're getting those clients and we're being able to do that stuff. And it's just, it's that excitement of getting the customers or the clients that share your vision and just go, I trust your judgment. The money's there. Just do it. Build it awesome. And, we're at that point now where we're building the stuff that I could only ever dream of doing when I was watching you guys that many years ago.
That's awesome. That first customer, when you're sitting there talking to them and going through the scope of work and how large of a project this is going to be, how important that was, obviously, for your shop at that point in time. Obviously, the little bit that I've gotten to know you and watching on some of the YouTube videos, you definitely pride yourself on doing what you say you're going to do and taking care of that customer. At that point, when you're going through all that, how confident in yourselves were you that you were going to be able to pull off what you said you were going to be being able to pull off?
I reckon we were confident. The money side of it is where we were miles off. Like we'd be like, oh yeah, it's probably going to cost about this much, but we had no experience. We had no benchmark at that point. We were like, it's just what we were doing, but a bit more.
Scare them off either.
No, exactly. So you're like, it's like probably about X amount, and then it probably ended up. They probably ended up paying twice what we said it was, and in reality, if we'd charged all the hours, it probably would have been 4 times as much. Yeah, yeah. And now we're in, no doubt, the same sort of position you're in, where there's so much trust there from the start with the clients that they're reasonably, I don't even really do exact estimates now. It's just kind of like, it's going to be at least this much. Right. If that number scares you off, then you probably don't want to get on this journey.
Right. We're going to be as fair as you can absolutely be. Yeah. And still, even at this point, you know what? We're probably going to end up donating some stuff.
Good portion.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure you guys have the same thing. So all of our guys timesheet digitally. I just sit down, look at the invoice come in from generated by all the guys' work. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, I can't really charge that for that job, and you find yourself just knocking a few hours out here and out. And then you think, why am I doing this? Like, these guys can afford it. But then I'm like, well, it's not fair, because, he could have nailed that job better the first time. Yep. He's probably repeated some work. But we're going in the right, every project we do is more in the right direction. And the key is showing, this goes back to the media thing, the key is showing the detail, because the customer doesn't query it if they can really understand how much effort has gone into all of those little jobs they see on their invoice.
Until it gets to bodywork.
And then even then, it's difficult, because it's just sanding. Like,
put it on,
8 hours sanding, yes. It is, but even then, there's certainly an element you can do. So we use an app actually called Global Workshop, where the customer gets like a build timeline on their phone. And each member of staff has the app on their phone. They photograph literally exactly what they're doing all the time. So it could be as detailed, the feed the customer gets, as block sanding front wing, like 320 grit, 120 grit, 600 grit, whatever it might be, and a few pictures. Yeah, so it's fairly boring to look at, but you can suddenly, when you see this massive timeline,
off after
you get this timeline. Well, they're kind of condensed into into sort of daily updates. But when you see that, suddenly you're like, well, okay, yeah, it does make sense.
They're doing a lot of work. Right?
Yeah, it's always hard to justify to yourself, the number and the hours in it. But then you look at the guys in the shop and the level of talent that you have, that probably not anybody else out there that could have done it any quicker, and you're doing something for the most part that no one else has done almost every single time on a car. Yeah, it's not like you're replacing a fender or bolting
ultimately the hours are only there because they wanted to do a good job.
Right.
They're not
problem
charging.
is we're all in the industry. We all create, for the most part, friendships with our customers. We all love what we're doing. We always want to do a good job, and you want to please that customer. But the problem with that is we are, at the end of the day, craftsmen. We are specialists, and all the guys that we employ are specialists. When you hire a guy to come out and fix your HVAC system, right, and he says it's a minimum of $250, right, and he does it in 40 minutes, that guy doesn't look and he's like, dude, I feel bad about charging this. I'm only going to He charges you exactly what he says, and he walks on out the door. And you're like, these guys are making the money, but it's the... they're not, that guy, that technician's not friends with that household that he comes to, and it's like, I want to take care of you, so you call me again for your HVAC. He's probably never going to see you again,
And this is it's a passion-based business. That guy's not going to go home and show his wife or kids what he's been doing that day.
Yes.
You or I probably do.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. So as it starts progressing, right? Well, first of all, before we jump too far, what were you and your brother doing before you had that conversation that, hey, we want to start this?
That's always a good question, actually. I was a bar manager.
Okay.
So nothing to do with cars. Cars was just totally a hobby for me. My brother's a qualified engineer, and he was working for a rubber extrusion factory that made like sealing systems for cars, so for Toyota and various other manufacturers.
He's a wild
so
man,
he
man.
so he was
Great,
like a
crazy.
so he was basically I think he was a process improvement engineer. So basically his job was to, if there were defects or maybe the line could produce things faster, his job was to look into how they could improve the production lines to solve those problems. Previously to that was the same job in a steel rolling mill, Timken Bearings. You've probably heard of them. So there was a steel mill in the UK, and he was process improvement manager at a Timken steel rolling mill, doing the tubes that bearing races are made from. So he's always been engineering based. But you know, it was kind of like, and this actually carries on now to this day. He's totally the engineering side
I can see
of our business.
The bins and the organization in the background and stuff like that.
Well, to be fair, that's not necessarily him, but
Okay.
He's kind of this mad professor that just comes up with these amazing engineering solutions for things. So, you know, when we take on a project and we want to design our own suspension systems for it or that sort of thing, it's him. It's totally him. You know, he'll go through all the maths on everything and work out all the geometry and, you know, get things how he wants it from an engineering perspective. My general input is the cosmetic side of it. Like, I want it to look a certain way, and in the early days that was a clash, and now it's this quite nice harmony where he'll be like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and I'll be like, yeah, but that's not going to look very good. Like, how can we make that look better? And then he sort of now accepts that and is like, okay, yeah, you're right, how can we make that look better? And kind of between the two of us, we generally come to a solution for things that works well and looks good at the same time, and that's what hot rod building's all about, right. Really, isn't it? You know, it's got to work, it's got to look good, but this might be something a lot of hot rod builders don't care about, but it's got to work well as well.
It does. Yep. Yeah, you've been around long enough. You know the inner working.
It works. Done. Next. Versus
well, that's good to hear on the two different mindsets of the business and being brothers as well, working together and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. As you're progressing, so you get those out there, you're putting more and more stuff on Facebook at that point in time, and so more builds come in. When was the first American, or were you interested in that stuff at that point?
Yeah,
we wanted to build one, or
not from the very start, but I'd say by the time we were following you guys, 2013, 2014, yes. Our first American build was one that we've not completed, and you'll be all too familiar with the sideline project thing, I'm sure. But we did a 69 Camaro, although I always say Camaro and then get shot down brutally on YouTube. But yeah, 669 Camaro, which was a really ambitious project, and I think we may still get to finish it one day. We built our own chassis, which we were kind of 50% of the way through. It was going to be, much like you guys actually, it was going to be C6 Corvette geometry, C6 uprights and spindles. We had an axle built by somebody I forget the name of now over here. We pretty much built the whole body from new panels because the original body there wasn't really much usable on it. And then therein lies its own set of challenges because all the replacement body panels are terrible. So, you know, all the work in trying to sort that out. We were doing flush glass on it. We were going to do rocker arm suspension. So we were going to have C6 uprights, our own fabricated wishbones to C6 geometry. But then we were going to have, what we wanted was adjustable ride height, but we didn't want airbags because they've got that kind of fundamental issue of the higher you go, the higher the spring rate is, which is the opposite of what you want, really. Right. So we were going to have push rods to rocker arms to then have longitudinal coilovers on the chassis legs, frame rails to you. And on the end of that, hydraulic actuators, so we could use the hydraulics to change the ride height, but then you'd still have a normal coilover in there, so you could keep the spring rates the same, and keep the damping rates, you know, on normal coilover dampers. So that was the plan with it. And we got a lot of the body done and a lot of the chassis done, and then it got sidelined, and it's still at our place now. We are now in the latter stages of a 68 Camaro, which is really shaping up something special.
Videos final assembly.
That was like one of these builds that just spirals, because originally it was going to be kind of like your Survivor Series cars. So we were going to leave the paintwork alone, do a nice interior in it, do a chassis swap on it, LS3, make a nice job of the suspension, and then as we got into it, we realised the body looked immaculate. It had been restored. It was bought from a fairly prestigious dealership over here, but it was terrible. It was just full of filler, Bondo to you.
Yes.
Okay, so
Or filler.
Or filler as well. It's a common word.
and like everywhere. I had this heart-wrenching conversation with the guy we built it for, where we'd kind of stripped it down, and we'd noticed when we had it on like a rotisserie, and we'd seen some little pinholes on the underside, and we were like, that's odd because there's holes there, but they don't go all the way through. And then we realised somebody had glued another set of floor pans inside the floors. And then the quarter panels, we could see some massive weld lines from the inside where it was kind of an overlapped weld and it looked distorted. And
Is
we
it
were like,
not amazing when you look at the stuff that they do to hide that it basically took
more work. Yeah,
It took way longer to do it the wrong way.
totally. This was exactly one of those cars. And saying that has reminded me of another car we did. Similar story. It was a Ford Cortina. And I've never seen such artistry in filler work. You know where you have a door skin and you've got the frame and the skin is clinched around the frame like this. So from the back, there's a little line of metal. Well, that had obviously rotten away. So they just welded down the edge of the door to attach it. But then to make it look like it was still original, they'd actually created in filler, sculpted the return edge on the inside of the door.
That's skill.
And we looked at that and we thought that would have taken more work than just replacing the door skin. It's just crazy. But yeah,
More importantly, I want to know what kind of filler they use, because like you can't see shit in something that was done like that. But then you'll have a car that's just a tiny skim coat, and you'll find an imperfection that explodes.
100-degree weather for one weekend at a car show, and you're like, oh, crap, that's coming back.
Yeah. Or you can a little bit of sinkage here. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's got a street sign, a bale of hay, and like a full chicken coop underneath it. And
it looks perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. This Camaro looked absolutely perfect. And then we started, I spoke to the guy. I said, look, we've got to dig at this. I can't leave it, because if we build this car and then it starts rusting out, you're going to be crying. We've got to pull it all apart again. We need to find this out now. So we started just digging grinders into it, and everywhere we dug on the quarters, there was like half an inch of filler. So we ended up replacing like almost every panel on it, and it's just one of those stories we've seen time and time again, where people go out and try and buy a really good donor, and you think you wanted to get one that had never been restored. That's the best donor because you can see everything there is, but they sometimes go out there and think, wow, this one's shiny, we'll get this one, and you could have just saved your money and bought the cheapest one there was.
Did they put at the first restoration? Did they put full quarters on it or half flaps?
They'd put on that. They'd put half quarters in it with a terrible. They hadn't even butt welded it. It was like an overlapped weld, and it was distorted to hell. And they just flattened it all out with filler.
And there's so much more welding in doing that one. And you got less seams if you do a full quarter. Up at the
yeah.
It's just funny how many times that's when you come
I think
across.
it's skill set, like they just don't have the skill to do it, or don't have the know-how, or don't have the care, and it's just like, we'll just get this done.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
everyone who's talked about it, it's like it'd be way less work to do it the right way.
Right.
But
I can see, like, not that it's right or excused, but on the filler sculpting, right? Sometimes that does come down to the skill, but it's also because that guy was, whoever did it before. Sometimes it's body shop work, right? And they don't do metal shaping, so they don't do the metal skills. They don't do that. So they can do body work, right? Or filler work. And that guy that's doing is trying to, in his mind, he's thinking he's trying to do a good job. So we've seen stuff on like
phenomenal filler work.
Filler work. We've seen stuff like on floor pans, whatever, of like filler and fiberglass of recreating like stamping lines.
Yeah, making all the beads.
Making all the beads and stuff, and it's fully out of fiberglass or fully out of resin or filler.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit, that was a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like, we call it finger fucking, but we don't like edging out stuff like on bead rolls that we put in body work, let alone creating one out of filler. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be. Yeah. Anyway, we're going off.
I think it's just that people don't have the vision to see the whole job through. So they see the little bit that's in front of them, and they think, well, I've got a rusty wheel well. We'll just cut it out and weld some metal in. They don't think about the next step and that, that's going to need a load of filler over it.
Right.
And then it's like, that's now going to need a load of filler over it. So then they have to do that because it's too late. So
right.
Those are probably the worst conversations to have with a customer, though, aren't they? When you know the car is just, they probably spent a lot of money on it, brought it to you to do your thing with it, and they're going to spend a ton more.
Yeah. And the thought of like, you didn't need to spend this much on the donor car. You might as well have just bought the cheapest one you could find because it would have needed the same amount of work.
Yep. We had a guy actually do that. He brought a Chevelle in, and it was just, there was nothing left to it, but it was in primer. And this was early in our career, so I'm having that like same like inner battle. Like, what do I tell this guy? Do I tell him the car is horrible? Call him like, listen, I think we need to find a better car. And I happened to find one on eBay, and this is original grandma car, never been touched, never been restored. Your car, I think, is just too far gone, and start like listing all the problems. He's like, oh, I bought the absolute cheapest one I could find. I spent $700 to buy that Chevelle. Like, all right, cool. We're throwing that thing the fuck out. It's garbage.
Yeah. No sentimental value whatsoever. No. Just find me a better one. Yeah, path of least resistance. It's interesting. I was watching a couple of videos yesterday. Your take on building stuff as a whole, but specifically on individual parts, and some of it's on American-based companies. I'm seeing you're doing the Camaro, the coil covers. You're, Holley modifying them. You're like, oh, they're made for different coil packs. We'll figure that out. We'll do this. I think I know the answer, and it's probably because of the cars you started building at the beginning. But were you surprised about the American manufacturers industry of things, that how good they were, or how difficult it was on some stuff to work together?
I think the thing that probably amazed me initially is just because the market here is so big, there's so much available new aftermarket. But then that good feeling goes downhill really fast because most of it's terrible.
Yes.
Which you only find out when you've spent hundreds of dollars shipping it over to the UK. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the Holley, those you're talking about, those Holley cam coil covers we were using on that Camaro build, which actually they fine. They do the job well. The coil packs, they weren't designed for the coil packs we were using, but all we had to do was machine the holes out a little bit bigger, which was fine. And it's cheaper to do that than to buy 8 new coil packs. Right. Yeah, so there was no reason to do that.
I think my point, or my biggest takeaway when I was watching that, it just kind of dawns on me. I'm like, y'all are, first of all, it's a little different because, like you said, you're having to spend $100 in shipping, and you're also having to wait time, right, for those parts to come in. You said that in the video. I knew when I was purchasing them, it wasn't made for these coil packs, but I was going to get them and then figure it out based on how we needed to. Mounting holes were fine, but it canted the plug outlet a little different, so you ovaled the holes. It wasn't we can't go on. What do we do? No. Throw the hands up. It was figuring it out. And I think we've talked about this on this podcast a bunch of times, that we've been in this for a long time, 20 plus years, right? The aftermarket and all the manufacturers as a whole have come a long way. Parts are getting way better. The problem, as things get better and better and better, you become accustomed to them always being good. Well, this part could be the greatest part known to man. It'll never have a failure. And this part can also be pretty good. However, these two parts were never thought about, designed to work together. So because this part doesn't bolt up and allow this part to bolt up, doesn't mean either of the parts suck.
No, not
right? It's just that this guy couldn't build these motor mounts with every single header manufacturer in mind.
Yeah.
Right? These headers are a great header, but he didn't build that header with this guy's motor mounts in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that mentality, sometimes because we've become so accustomed to it, or lazy, thinking that, boom, it's a great part from a great manufacturer, it will bolt up. Well, it bolts up to the thing it was supposed to bolt up to, but maybe there's 5 things around it that those guys had no idea that you were using, or they couldn't engineer around it.
Yeah.
Accessory drives, for instance, we've got that. We see a lot of it on the chassis side of things, because it's our chassis, say for a 69 Camaro, it will bolt on a spec chassis, will bolt directly to the body of a Camaro. No problem, right? However, an LS3 and a T56 will also bolt directly into that chassis, right? Small little trans tunnel for the T56, nothing for the TKO. Now, there's how many different radiator manufacturers that you could use for a radiator? How many different accessory drive that you could use? How many different headers? How many fans, shrouds, stuff like that. So there's a multitude that will work, but however, we can't say, here's 200 different manufacturers. These 50 we know will work. These other 150 maybe. That it's difficult when you get to that point where the guys are like, well, the radiator doesn't fit. Call a Roadster shop,
Yeah.
And you want to be like, yeah, we'll walk you through it. When I see you and the way you're doing stuff, it's kind of like, well, we're building the car. We're going to buy the best parts we can, but at the same time, these coil covers weren't designed to work with these coils. But these are the coils I want to use, so I'm going to oval the holes out, and I'm going to make it look nice, and nobody's going to ever know anything was done, taking care of the customer, versus saying, well, we bought these coil covers because they look cool. Now we need to buy 8 new coil packs just because. You know, it's a different mentality of
building a car versus putting a car together.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is too because you started out building and you're still building cars that there's not really an aftermarket for. I mean, some of the stuff you're doing, you're building everything from scratch. So you're accustomed to doing it already.
And I guess that links into that decision about those coil covers was we could have made our own. You know, we could have designed and machined our own covers. But actually, in that instance, my first thought wasn't let's go straight and machine our own because there's going to be hours in that. There'll be a few £1,000s worth of machining. It's a lot of money. And actually, what do we want from these? Well, we want to cover the coil packs. We want to keep the oil in. We want to be able to fill the oil, and we want them to look a certain way. And so let's just have a look what's out there first. You know, that's the first thought. And I guess that subconsciously that's keeping the customer at the back of my mind because I could have just made a ton more money by making custom ones.
Right.
But they look like they would do the job. And as with all the sort of bespoke aftermarket parts, you've got to. This is what you're basically saying is you've got to assume that there might be some work to do for your particular application. The problem we've had with like aftermarket parts is like the OE replacement stuff, and it's the same in the UK. Like we do tons of stuff for Jaguars and MGs and stuff like that, and the problem really comes from the end customer wanting everything to be cheap, and that kind of forces reproduction manufacturers to cut corners on making the parts, send out to get them made in China or wherever.
Yep.
And then it's like people are surprised when they're bad, and you think, well, yeah, but you wanted to pay like $20 for this part, which realistically, if we were making this as a machined part, would be like $500 or more. So obviously, it's not going to be as good.
If there was a quarter panel, I mean, you see it on when there was NOS stuff. NOS brought a premium. But if there was a $4,000 '69 Camaro quarter panel, right? That was like OE tooling, clicks right into place and all that. And then there's the $140. I know.
I don't know how they ship some of the stuff here for the price that they sell.
Cardboard costs.
Yeah.
And you had, say, the company, gave them those two options. We all know astronomically more of the sales that they would have.
Yeah.
The guy's like, I'm not paying $4,000 for a quarter panel.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. $8,000 for 2 of them?
Yeah. But then you look at how much labor goes into making the other one good.
It's like $100 to put it on and make it fit. Kind of all comes out.
And then you, as a hot rod builder, you're the one who then has the questions over, like, well, how does it take that long to do that?
Right.
Because you wanted to pay $100 for a quarter panel.
Right. And it's like you said, it's over time. And then a new company wants to start up, and they're gonna find a new supplier or the same supplier, and they're gonna make their business by shaving a couple more dollars off of it, right? So they're going to do a stamped control arm for $4 cheaper, right? And they're going to get their SEO optimization. So they're going to come up against, so the guy that's going to buy his, stamped lower control arms for his Chevelle restoration or whatever is like, oh, those are cheaper. Yeah. Or the wife's buying them for a gift or something like that. And well, these are the cheapest ones I could find. They're all the same.
Yeah.
They're control arms. They got to fit.
Yeah.
And
I think there's been a pretty good split though of a lot of companies that have noticed that and gone the complete different way and set out to build a significantly better product that does cost more. They're not doing the volume, but
right.
I think it's apparent looking at them if you know what you're looking at.
Absolutely. I think that's what's great too is, again, both sides of it. Most of these manufacturers have also dealt with these same things, and they're like, we've got to do better. We don't want our customers going through the same stuff that we've been having to go through buying other people's parts, and the stuff has gotten great. If a part doesn't do what that part's supposed to do, like if you buy a brake kit and the car doesn't stop, that's a problem with that manufacturer's, Now, if you buy a brake kit that your custom wheels don't fit on, it's not the brake manufacturer's fault, right? Well, I mean, you should have told me that I had to get a custom wheel. Well, you're buying brakes. Like, I'll sell you all the brakes you want, But that's just the mentality because it's things have gotten so much easier than they once were. And you got younger builders coming up and stuff, and they they didn't have to go through the struggle, as much on parts, figuring things out in the past because there wasn't the manufacturers out there.
And you get this intuition after a while, but it takes so long to get there. 10 years probably, and you get this feel, and I can't define what it is, but when you're browsing parts, you kind of get a feel for, that's a reasonable price, and it's probably going to do the job pretty well. And then you're like,
too good to be true.
But then, it's such a minefield now because there's so many people out there chancing their luck that you will assume because something's more expensive, it's better. So they'll have the same imported part that somebody's selling for like $50, and they'll just chance their luck, art it up a bit, take some better pictures, write some better description about it, and sell it for like 3 times the price. And you go, well, actually, that's probably better.
It does. Look
it's exactly
better.
the same
it's a
thing.
Better, way better website. That website looks more professional.
Exactly.
I told you that we were buying these chairs, right?
Yeah.
What was that website that I was on? Wayfair.
Yeah.
They'll show the same exact chair in like 5 different backgrounds, and one of them is $100 and one of them is $900, and you're like,
Exactly.
I'm gonna take the one for $400 right in the middle. It's probably better quality, but if it's not, I'm not getting fucked as bad.
Yeah.
Same warehouse, same orders coming in. Those guys.
And the scary thing is, like that type of purchasing where you just look at the pictures, read the description, is now starting to spread to much more expensive things. So people buy cars like that now, like new cars. They'll be like, oh, this looks good. The review's good. It's a 5-star review.
Yep.
I'll buy it. And then before you know it, you've just spent $40,000 on something which you then have to live with for 2 years, hating it.
What does the aftermarket side look like for all the European cars and stuff that you're normally building?
Yeah, good. Perhaps not so much for the stuff we're normally building because we're kind of building some really out there, obscure, oddball stuff. But yeah, for like VW, Audi, Jaguar, there's a pretty decent supply. The stuff we're doing, I guess, is largely more like your really big build projects where you're kind of just throwing it all away and starting from scratch with everything.
Anyway.
So most of the cars we're building, some of the body is probably more or less the original, but almost everything else is we'll just start from scratch with it, and so all the suspension systems are totally redesigned, whether we use parts from other cars or whether we design it all from scratch. So we're building a pair of Mark 1 Escorts at the minute, Ford Escorts. You probably saw that we previously built a Mark 1 Escort for Gordon Murray, who's like a car designer. He'd be designing the McLaren F1.
Yes.
We were commissioned to build kind of one of his sort of daily cars, and it's a Mark 1 Escort that we've totally reimagined underneath. So it had independent rear suspension instead of the live axle, Ford Duratec kind of modern Ford engine. Cosworth built that for us. Really cool. But all the suspension was one-off stuff. There was literally not a single part of it that was bought from an aftermarket part supplier.
Right.
Yeah, so it's much like you building your own chassis, making your own wishbones, and I've seen your machining centres and stuff down there. You're making almost everything, and we're kind of pushing the door of that now, where a lot of the builds, it's just not worth trying to go, oh, maybe this will work. Build the car, test it. It's not as good as we hoped. We might as well just design it how we want it in the first place. So yeah, the aftermarket parts supply thing doesn't tend to affect us that much these days.
It's all fine and dandy until it's like lock mechanisms or
that's a good
window whiskers or internal trim stuff that
and that in those instances, that a lot of the builds we're doing recently will swap those bits out for more modern things that are available new from the manufacturer.
Okay.
So for instance, we're doing a Morris Minor at the minute, which is, if you know what one of those is,
it's the little purple one that you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that is the outer bodywork is essentially still Morris, but we fabricated wider wings on it, fenders, and it's all Mazda MX-5 underneath, so it's or Miata.
Yeah, buddy.
You know all about that.
So rear axle, it's got the backbone, the gearbox, all the front subframe. The only thing we changed away from Miata is the engine, so it's a Ford Zetec 2-litre on individual throttle bodies, 200 horsepower. It's a little bit smaller than the Duratec that they got in the Miata. But on that, one of the things was, the door latch and lock mechanisms we weren't happy with. They were just like a bolt, like a round pin with a chamfer on it, and they were notorious in the day for just flying open when you went round a corner. So that was there was a combination of two things. That solution was like, one, we used a latch from a newer car that we knew we could get new still, and we refabricated the back of the door and the pillar to do that. And then the second part of it was the handle originally pivoted on like a casting that had the lock in it, and there was no exterior moving parts, so we could not connect any kind of central lock into it. So on that, we just CAD drew a complete new piece that had the cranks in it to do the lock mechanism movement. We 3D printed them in aluminium, so the final parts are metal 3D prints, and then the handle itself is a billet machined aluminium handle. So it was kind of like piecing together the different things, because we could have made the whole latch mechanism, but obviously designing and making a latch mechanism with pressed parts is going to cost a ridiculous amount of money. So
That is one
And it's not that cool to look at.
Morris Minor customer, isn't it?
it's absolutely, he's that's going to be the coolest Morris in the country, I'm sure. It's a project I'm very proud of.
Yes, I was pretty impressed with, like, looking at a lot of the videos. It seems like you guys are really at a similar pace with us on taking on all the modern technology and using that in these old cars. Is that kind of where you see the future of the business going?
That's generally where we're trying to. Our customers are basically people who love the look of an older car. They want it to feel a little bit more modern to drive, but not so modern it's lost the character.
soul.
Because most new cars, they just don't.
There's no
They
connection.
don't, there's no connection here. It's the emotional side of it. And that actually links quite well to a lot of people say, are you going to do an electric conversion? And that scene in the UK is massive. People electric converting classics. And it's just so far away from what has driven us to be where we are, because it's all about it's the emotional connection, like the sensory thing, like the noise, the feel of everything.
So you're telling me a guy driving around in a Tesla doesn't have any emotional connection to that
Well,
throttle pedal?
I drive an electric car as my daily car.
Do you?
Yeah.
But do you have no emotional connection
No.
to it? It's just transportation.
It's like I have a 10-mile drive to work and back.
Might as well
and
be a rental
and it
car,
does,
too.
yeah, exactly. It does the job really well, and I can set it to get to the right temperature before I get in it in the morning. It's not icy, there's so many cool features about that. But when I want to go on a drive at the weekend, that's the last car I would possibly think about driving. There's no enjoyment there for me other than, well, there is enjoyment, but the enjoyment is that it gets me to work really easily and it's warm and comfortable.
Right.
But at the weekend, I don't care about those things. I want something that gives me the buzz. It gives me the thrill and has the feel and makes me feel like I'm part of it. I want to shift gears and rev and do all the things that make you feel like you've worked to achieve that. Even though it's just making a journey.
Well, I think what Phil's saying and you're echoing too, that is what a lot of people are doing, and that's what we've been doing for quite some time, and you're doing it as well. But it's a little more difficult to do than just to say, so you don't want to lose there was once a time not so long ago we were still saying the same things. We were going to put some modern features in an old car, so you're going to make it stop better, and you're going to put larger wheels and tires, and you're going to put a new fuel injected motor, and you're going to do some of that stuff. Well, that's still the same mentality, but the mentality's continuing to get more hyper focused as we go, and there's things that you would take for granted or just learn to live with, and each year goes by, you say we're not going to live with those things anymore. To your point on the door latches, right? There was a time 10 years ago where the 69 Camaro would just shut like a 69 Camaro. It would stop awesome, had great power, seal up good, was fairly quiet on the inside, but the door would just shut the way the door was until it was like, it can't be this way anymore. The door needs to shut better.
Yeah. It's a moving target. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the technology helped out with that because, like, from your point, you couldn't recreate a cast aluminum door handle or a pot metal door handle. There was no way to do anything with it until you had the 3D scanning, the engineering, the being able to 3D print a prototype and then machine the actual. Like, a lot of those parts, you had to put them on because there was no other alternative to get around it.
Yeah. Right. It was, well, I want it to be like this. Well, how are you going to, when you're dealing with cast parts back in the day, pot metal part,
It's going back on the way it is.
what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah.
But then, like you said, as that progresses, just like our whole entire thought processes on the products that we're buying and them working together and continuing to build, you're expecting more and more out of yourself and out of that build, and to please your customer more at the end of the day, because that's what it's still the same thought that was at the very first build that you did for that customer. You still have that same thought now, and you're like, what can I do better? What can we do in the glove box? Where can we hide? Yeah. It's fine to just put some USB ports, next to the shifter, but it still doesn't look like what Mercedes would do. So how do we do things that the OEs are doing? Keep the soul, right? Yeah. But then if there's some, you can't say your rear view mirror is going to be floppy because it's an old car. Old cars have soul. Well, yeah, but like I want to keep the soul, but make my rear view mirror stay.
That wasn't part of what made it good.
So and it's just you fixed all the big problems, so now you're down to refining the small problems.
Smallest little thing. Better. I mean, even down to vent windows and stuff. I mean, screwing around with vent windows.
You can't make those work.
You can't make them work. And
funnily enough, on that Morris, they used to have those, and we've totally redesigned the door so it's a single piece glass.
That's how you make them work. Yeah, you do away with it.
Yeah, basically, and put aircon in there, which is what we've done. Yeah, but I mean, talking about moving targets, another part of all of that is people's expectations, the client's expectation, because it's not just modernising a car; it's what they feel is a modern car, or what they like about it. That's actually something I always say when we first get inquiries about building projects. I say, look, it's never like a question about what car they want to build. It's like, okay, tell me more about yourself. What's your car history? What cars have you driven? What did you like about them? What did you not like about them? And piecing that bit together gives you more information about what their expectation is. Because if, like talking about the way the door shuts, if you can clearly tell from the list of cars they've had, they don't care about that, then that's going to be lower on the priority list. Right. So it's a moving target in many ways, because it's trying to create what people perceive as a more modern feel in a car, but that perception is different from one person to the next.
Besides EV or any type of motors, wheels, tires, suspensions like that, for creature comfort side, is there a point where you would draw the line of like, based on your request, you're asking for a new Maybach, and it will not be.
Yeah, there is. There's definitely, like, when people say, "Oh, I want it to be comfortable," you've got to be this is what the car we're working with. We can't make it literally feel like a brand new Rolls Royce, because they've made it feel like that with millions of pounds worth of development and testing. And realistically, we're trying to hit this first time with almost no testing. We haven't got a second go at this. And you've got maybe gutters and rubber seals, and the body shell was never designed to be quiet. That was never
right.
So it's all about transparency with the client. Making sure they understand that we're going to make this way nicer than it was originally, but it's not going to be like jumping in a new Rolls Royce.
We deal with that.
You always need to make them drive the car first before you've done it. Yeah. Just realize how horrible it was.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time it's asking for stuff that 100% will not be able to be made to work to their expectations, and then you're going to end up having to warranty that stuff that like stupid stuff of like 72-way adjustable power seats, and heated seats and cooled heated and cooled, but automatic based on how the outside ambient temperature and stuff. Like
that's like shit you would want.
Like stuff like that. I reckon I wouldn't draw the line. I reckon I'd see that as a challenge. The one thing I think that I've sort of considered as I can't do it at the minute is radar stuff, radar cruise, automatic braking, that kind of thing. Like your new car's got radar cruise, so you can keep it to a fixed distance. And realistically, for us to swap that over from another car is going to be like a safety concern. So
you'd have to have them sign something.
So safety concern stuff, I wouldn't touch.
The seating thing, though, is always, for years, has blown me away on, even before it was power stuff, from customer standpoint, because you deal with the customer. You're like, well, can I have some seat adjustment? Before it was manual. Well, I need it to kind of go a little bit further than that, a little bit farther back. And you're like, well, who all is driving the car? Well, no, this is way too nice to let anybody drive. Well, let's just sit it where you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess
I've
so.
got a
but
great uncle.
I need
6'10".
I need to have some adjustment. Well, then you get to the power stuff, and you're like, oh, it doesn't go all the way back as far as I want to. Well, you're driving it, right? Well, I mean, yeah, but what if my wife wants to drive? Are you going to let her drive it? No. Well, then it doesn't matter if the seat fits her or not.
Barb,
I know
you're
what you
driving
mean,
the
yeah,
car.
yeah.
Barb's not driving.
There's sometimes requests where you're like, do you really need that? And yeah, well, I think my stance would be, I would say that. But if they were
Figure
dead
it
set
out.
on it, I'd
Yeah.
be like, yeah, we'll make it work.
Oh,
but
yeah.
then there are sometimes constraints. You know, you're talking about heated and cooled seats. That takes up space in the seat.
That makes them this tall.
Yeah, and old cars, they're so much smaller than people think, and you know, height-wise particularly. So sometimes, yeah, I think recently we've done a project, E-Type, we're working on at the minute, and it was like, oh, can we do electric seats in it? And I was like, I just don't think we can, because we need this. We need your ass to be like this far off the floor, and there's no room for motors there, and I can't go lower because then ground clearance is going to be an issue. I can't make the roof higher because it'll make it look shit.
Yep.
Sometimes there are just constraints there which you can't compromise. Well, you could compromise it, but having a cooled seat is lower on the priority list than grounding out all the time or the car looking terrible.
Right. Yeah, cutting a sunroof so your head will fit through it. because you can get, So what, you touched on the EV side of things. It's good to hear you say that, you know, because we've got the similar feeling on the, not saying never, but man, it just doesn't have the.
No, I think I think it's been embraced a lot more in Europe, probably because your average person's drive is a lot shorter. I think for a daily car, it makes a lot of sense. You know, like I say, my typical journey is just 10 miles each way. But then I am in a sort of fortunate position in that I've got other cars.
I was going to say, are you going to have a separate car
I do,
to go on
exactly.
trips?
And so for me, it makes perfect sense. But then for the average person who's then like, okay, I now want to do a 300-mile journey, the infrastructure just isn't there. There are charging stations at most of our fuel stations, but they have like 2 or 3 chargers, and the rate of people adopting electric cars is so fast that those chargers are always got people at them.
But then, I mean,
You're sitting there for an hour to get.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to hang out at the gas station.
I think that there's like a bit of maths I keep saying to people, like, it's not been thought through, because if you think about how long it takes to gas your car, it's like a minute, maybe 2 minutes perhaps. And even quite a quick charging electric is going to be half an hour. So that's like a minimum of 15, if not 30 times longer. So if your average gas station's got 20 pumps at it, you're going to need that many times more charging stations to swap. And that's just not...
No.
And they're taking 100 kilowatts, 150 kilowatts. That's like your massive overhead cables. You don't just wire in 100 kilowatt chargers and it'd be okay.
Yeah, but you're applying like common sense.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Well, I'm extremely narrow-minded on just about everything. And
Glad we got that out now.
but at the same time, I try to play devil's advocate and look at both sides of most stuff, knowing that I'm narrow-minded. I'm wondering.
You just try to pick the other side apart.
Yeah, you're right. I do. But I'm wondering. I don't think it's the same, but I'm also wondering, are we those old guys now that back in the day when it was, I'm not touching a computer-controlled EFI car. You're not putting an LS in nothing. It's small block, big block,
I can tune a carburetor.
carbureted. Yeah, I don't want any of that fancy electronic stuff. And it didn't matter how much you told them that what it could sound like or how much horsepower it could make or the better gas mileage it could get. It didn't matter. It was, nope, it has no soul. It's easy. You know, look at all the computers. Are we those guys?
I've had this thought a lot, and I think maybe, in all honesty, maybe. But then I always think, you know, like, I got into building cars because I love all the things I've just talked about, you know. So if we started doing electric conversions, I would only be doing it for financial reasons, and that's not why we started our business. That's what it comes down to, really. Like, it's not what enthuses me. We do this business because of what I was excited by, what I'm passionate about, and I'm not passionate about that.
What if you put a bunch of speakers in the boot and made it sound like
No.
any type of
I've seen a lot of people doing that.
Borilla's got a whole exhaust system for
No,
them.
but you see, I always liken this to a fire. So if you were out camping somewhere, you know, you want to light a campfire, it would be way more efficient to have an electric fire in front of you. You know, turn on the bars, 3-bar electric fire. It would keep you warm, probably keep you warm more efficiently, and it would be powered by renewable energy. You could power it from solar power or wind power. but it wouldn't be the same.
Right.
You still want to gather around a fire.
Yeah.
And putting a picture of a fire there on a screen. So you have an electric fire with a tablet with a picture of a fire on it, a video of a fire.
You're not going to cuddle up with your
That's
girl
not
in
the
front
same
of-
thing. And so think about why it's not the same thing. You're warm, you're being warmed efficiently, you've got the visuals of a fire. So it's the same thing, surely. But it's not, is it? So why is it not?
Is it the nostalgic?
I
Is
don't
it the
know.
memories?
I don't
is it
know.
the thing of what you think it's supposed to be?
I don't know. And this is the mystery part of it. I wonder whether it's like
a
a
phenomenal
primitive
analogy,
thing.
yeah.
Is it a primitive part of us that wants to make fire, and an engine is making fire and controlling fire?
I get where you're going with it. I agree.
Maybe.
think
I don't know.
But you also know where this AI is going and where virtual reality is going, and there's going to be dudes having full-blown relationships and sex with robots.
And a fire that is like the real thing.
While adaptive cruise control's driving him down the highway.
So yeah, I don't know. No, but if I'm enjoying, petrol, I'm enjoying burning petrol. And actually, I think the future we're going to carry on building internal combustion powered hot rods, and I think the future of that is actually synthetic fuels because it's only it's going to become just an enthusiast market rather than a daily transport thing.
Right.
And certainly in Europe, a lot of motorsport series are adopting synthetic fuels because it's a way of powering an internal combustion car without digging it up out of the ground.
I'm fine with the EV stuff continuing to push and being more and more mainstream, because anything that becomes more and more mainstream makes what we're doing more and more anti-culture or counterculture. And anything that's counterculture is what's growing faster, and it pushes more people to do it because it's more of that, I want to pick a side and I'm going to pick the side against that. You've got guys out there that are building hot rods and muscle cars and stuff like that wouldn't have gotten into it because they're making a life choice of, I'm going to be that hardcore man, or I'm going to pick gasoline, or, yay, America. You probably saw a lot of them at the NASCAR race.
Oh yeah.
And
A lot of shouting, whooping,
Yes.
hollering.
that because it's to prove a point, and it's to say, I'm going to do this way.
Yeah.
Especially
Stick
if they
it-
feel like they're being forced to go another way.
Sticking it to the man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Ford, we got a question here. The Ford Escort Mark I, you talked about it, that you built there. What is that your 69 Camaro over there?
Yeah, it probably is, to be fair. That's a good analogy. Yeah, it's a car, might even be more of a Mustang, I don't know, but it's a car that suddenly brought a really well-designed car to a huge number of people at an affordable price, which I probably more of a Mustang, I guess. So yeah, I suppose it's our Mustang, and everybody has a story. Everybody's dad had one. Everybody's dad learnt to drive in one, whatever it might be. It's a story car, and there's so many of them around. That's the other thing, which I see a lot, with the Camaros and Mustangs and stuff here. There's so many of them that it feels like the pool of Mark I or Mark II Escorts will never dry up.
Wow.
I'm sure it will, but it's probably how a Mustang feels here. You feel like there's always going to be one on somebody's drive somewhere.
Right.
We couldn't believe it. We're driving up here. Obviously, we've driven 1,600 miles from Miami.
Wow.
Once we got into sort of Tennessee, we were just going. We set it to like avoid motorways, so we were just going down all of the smaller roads. And like 1 in 2 people's backyards has got like a C10 truck in it or a Mustang or something.
Most of the motors are already hanging from the tree above it, too, so you can just...
Yeah, it was just that we found incredible because you just don't see that in the UK. There are lots of cars hidden away, but here it felt like every other house had a old truck or car parked out the back. But yeah, it's the Mark I Escort's definitely kind of our Mustang in that everybody's got a story about one. There's lots of them around.
That kind of relates to our general rule of thumb is everything we're building is either what the customer had when they were in high school or what their parents had growing up, that there's some emotional tie to.
Yeah. You definitely see there's a generational thing, and you see it in the values of cars as well. Like the cars that are suddenly peaking in value now in Europe are late 80s BMWs or Jap stuff, like Skylines, the Gran Turismo generation. So it's like R33, R34 Skylines or things of that era, basically. Even like E36 BMW 3 Series M3s, certainly E30s. We're actually involved in a restomod E30 M3 series that we're building. 30 cars
wow.
with full carbon bodies, all carbon exterior, billet, everything basically. I can't even begin to describe how many billet parts there are, like expansion tanks, power steering tanks, all the dash fascia, all the center console. Virtually every part that was plastic on it is now machined from solid. But really, we'll talk about that maybe off air. But it's a cool project.
Wow. Tell me about I can't ever pronounce it the correct way. I say
Ford.
No, it's Jaguar. LS3 project you did years ago.
Yeah, that had a huge following.
It was the car looks awesome. I've always thought those cars look cool. And then to put V8 American power in it. How did that come about?
It came about because the client came to us and said, I want a Jaguar XJ Coupe. I want it with a bit more of a modern, reliable drivetrain. And he actually said, could we do the supercharged Jag V8? And we've had this a lot. We've done a few other. We did 2 LS3 powered Mercedes restomods. And actually, when you look at it, all the facts, all roads lead to LS3, and it's not in the UK. It's not as cliched as it is over here to do that.
Right.
There's not people doing that because it's just a win. Like, it's lighter, more reliable, more powerful, cheaper. There's literally no negatives to it.
It's in everything.
Yeah. So we were like, you would be better off going LS3, and then we'll use I don't know, it's probably a 4L65 transmission, something like that. It just gives you, because you can get them from GM with like a pre-mapped ECU, which is so nice for normal road use. It's so nicely mapped. You just start it up on a cold day. It ticks over perfectly. It just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's how that came about. And then we did a few subtle. That was probably the first kind of resto mod where we did quite a lot of body changes and over a standard. Yeah, that's the car. And it put us on the map a lot for that kind of a bigger modified car. And we didn't even change that much. That's the amazing thing, is you perhaps would look at that and think, we must have changed everything on it. And we changed the valance at the front there. We slimmed the bumpers down and pulled them in. We changed the rear wheel wells, so they go higher up the body. Normally the original one, it kind of cuts across the tyre line. So we changed them up. We did some bespoke little rear quarter bumpers on it. But the pillarless design with that sort of full open side on it when you put the windows down is standard, and it looks stunning. They had vinyl roofs. They all had vinyl roofs originally. So one of the biggest changes is just deleting that vinyl roof. And we removed quite a lot of unnecessary trim. Yeah, we made those little quarter bumpers and changed the design of the rear valance, put different exhaust tips on it. But yeah, it just really worked. And we've had that's the car we get asked about so much that we're actually considering doing a little run of those cars. Maybe watch this space on that, but
yeah,
I've got 2 more builds booked in of those, and it's getting to the point where we're wondering about doing maybe a little production run. Interestingly, that's something that you guys have never kind of adopted. As I've seen, Jonathan Ward, he's done his little Broncos or F100s as he does.
We just started. We just launched serial number 1 about a month ago at Barrett Jackson.
So what's that going to
Finally
be?
got smart.
So the Legend series is the run of 4-wheel drive square body trucks.
Cool. Okay.
So those would be it's completely designed from the ground up, engineered from ground up, about close to 4 years of engineering, developed, prototype, driving, testing. So now the first one just sold at Barrett Jackson, and we've got another, close to a dozen or something that we're building right now for.
Yeah. That's awesome, because that's the thing that we see as a way we can expand a bit more, because you'll know that doing one-off bespoke cars, it's such a hard thing to scale up.
Oh no, we've been fine. I mean, we've been super profitable at it. And you can
So you guys have got the chassis build shop to really pin the business down, earn the money, and then you can have a bit of fun with the other stuff. Although I'm sure it's still pretty serious stuff, but we don't really have that, because not really any European cars are separate chassis type cars. So doing a chassis swap is just not something anybody ever thinks of. So we're kind of thinking, well, what can we do that's a repeatable, because it's when you get that repeatable thing where you can literally write a manual for it and like you train somebody up.
Morris Minor door handle.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you want to be able to just train somebody up to do this repeatable work.
We enjoy spending like 500 hours engineering a one-off set of taillights that go on one car, and then we throw the file away.
yeah.
They're never seen again.
Yeah. I mean, all of that stuff is awesome fun. It's what I love doing, but as you're basically saying, it's not a great money spinner. So it's nice to have potentially something else that would be more repeatable and more expandable, and that's where we kind of think, where we can't do something like your chassis shop, we could do little limited run, resto mod, kind of like the Singer Porsche sort of thing, but in other models, where we could build one prototype, iron out all the niggles with that, do a lot of testing with it, and then go, right, we're gonna tool up to do all of the bespoke parts for this, buy a load of shells, and churn out 10 or 15. So it's still really, really exclusive. It's still a small run. But
for my opinion, that Jaguar. Jaguar. I can't say. It's
Jaguar.
It's Jaguar. See, that's exactly what I said.
American as fuck right there.
It sounded good. It sounded like Dale Jr. saying it. So Jaguar, that to me would be hit right at home, because you really can never tell, unless you're an enthusiast, you can never really tell what year it is. It could be a late 70s. It could be a mid 2000s. Yeah. But it's always classic. It's just got a look. I love that car. I'm sitting here looking at it now.
I think they do well over here as well.
Oh, they do amazing.
Yeah. I feel a joint venture going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, tell us about you want to hear about the carbon fiber one that he said he can't talk about.
That'll be after hours.
The Alpha, the blue car there, that is a cool thing. That's an Alpha 105 GT Junior. And on that, the client came to us, he said, I want one of those. There's a company in the UK called Alphaholics who do a little production run of them. It's called
Solid name.
GTAR 290, I think it's called.
Okay.
290 horsepower per ton. That's where that number comes from. And he said to me, look, I want one like theirs, but I want it to be a lot more powerful. I want it to be as fast as any M-Series BMW around any UK track. That was the remit. And but he wanted it 4-cylinder. So we went to an engineering company in the UK called Millington, who do motorsport 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engines. And they built us an engine, which is a 2.7 litre 4-cylinder that's making way over 300 horsepower, naturally aspirated from a 2.7 litre. And we've got a sequential gearbox in it. We designed our own rear suspension. It's a Dion setup, which is like a solid beam that actually locates the wheels, but the diff isn't in that. The diff's mounted to the body like an independent setup.
Okay.
So you get the characteristics of a live axle, but not the unsprung weight. Because we wanted it to kind of still feel like the original did with a live axle. And then we did carbon fibre, so it's got carbon fibre doors, bonnet and boot. We gutted the boot floor and made that in aluminium. It ended up weighing 870 kilos.
Oh, wow.
And it's
kilos.
A little over 300 horsepower.
You're thinking pounds.
I was.
That'd
So
be really
kilos,
light for a car.
Yeah.
Kilo is
So
It's
that's
2 to
double
1?
in pounds. So yes, 1,600 pounds.
Super light.
Yeah, and 300 horsepower, naturally aspirated. So it's just like all there straight away. There's no lag or anything. It's just insane to drive. It's just and a sequential box, so it's just visceral like noise, gear shifting. Yeah, it's just incredible. And then actually the one at the top there, that was our first completely bespoke interior build. That's a Mercedes W108, which has an LS3 in it, funnily enough. And this is the first time we made everything from scratch on the interior. So all of that console, it's just aluminium panels that we've had hydro-dipped with the wood grain, aluminium fabricated dash. There's a screen. You can just see that little outline on the top of the dash in the middle. That's a screen that pops up.
Oh, wow.
Kind of, we did like a fabricated quadrant that sort of rotates around and the screen comes up on the dash. Yeah, you can see it there. And then actually Classic Instruments built us the instruments on that. So we quite often use American manufacturing, weirdly.
Crazy.
I think we made a lot of this. So the gear indicator that's another American company. Forget the name of them And then it's B&M shifter as well, so it's like all American in it.
Yeah, hot rod Mercedes,
redneck Mercedes.
And then I think we did, if you go forward or backwards to the console. So we did this is one of the first 3D prints we ever did. That air ride controller and the audio controls. The red bit is a 3D print that we've then flocked with like a burgundy flock material, and I think that's one of the first 3D printed final interior components. Vintage air. AC controls on there, obviously, and then we've got sort of Jag seats in it. You can see on the very right hand side there, the buttons for the electric seats that are in it, which are from an old early 90s Jag. But that was a super cool car. And funnily enough, Jonathan Ward, who I talked about earlier, he's building something really similar at the minute. He's doing a 108 kind of Survivor Series type build with an LS in it. You've probably seen it, maybe.
Well, man, that's awesome. It's good getting to hear the stories and your thought process about stuff, and it's funny just the things that you're incorporating, because it's not commonplace over there. And everybody wants what they don't have. Everybody wants to be a little different. So we're going to try and throw a Mercedes motor in this, or Jesse's doing a BMW motor in that new car he's doing, and y'all are doing LS stuff.
Yeah,
everybody wants to do a little bit.
We've now reached the point, because we've done 2 Mercedes, the Jag. We've doing a Jensen at the minute. We're doing a Jensen CV8, which is, you've probably heard of an Interceptor, but the CV8 was before the Interceptor. They only made 500 of them. It was a fiberglass body over a steel chassis, and we're doing we've done a complete carbon fiber version of the body with loads of changes. So we basically modelled lots of changes on the body, widened it, changed the swage lines, changed it to flush fitting glass apertures, had a mould taken of that. I've done a complete one-piece carbon fiber body for it. We've done a glass roof, which we've tooled up for, and had a one-off curved glass roof made that you can switch darker or lighter. And that is also having an LS, supercharged LS in that. But we've got to the point now where I'm starting to say, when we're planning projects, I'm like, should we do another LS one? I don't know. It's getting a bit like we're always doing this. But it's such a good solution.
It's always that. I mean, back in the day, even being in the import stuff, I mean, the greatest thing for us was any kind of JDM stuff, or right-hand drive, or actual Japan spec items, and they didn't give 2 shits about it, and they wanted lowriders, or mini trucks, G-body lowriders like that. And I mean, there was so many containers swapping,
going back and
forth, filling one full of right-hand drive Integra dashes and front ends, empty that, fill it full of lowriders, and ship it back. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Send us all the lowriders. We'll send you all. It's just funny how because it's what you're not used to. Like you said, the counterculture, something that everybody wants, something that nobody else has, a little bit different.
I forgot who I was talking to, but they said it's the distant expert is the explanation, that if they're in your backyard, you instantly disqualify them. Like, that's not something that's cool or you should do. But if you can go to California and get
he must know what he's talking about.
It's got to be better, because out in California, that's how they do it.
Even though he's in somebody else's backyard there.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, now we get to the time we ask them the standard questions. So, hope you're ready. We do these questions with every single guest. We might have missed 1 or 2, but depending on how drunk we got. So your personal first car, and a story about that car.
It was a Ford Sierra, which probably wouldn't be that here.
What would a Sierra be?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's like if you Google UK European Ford Sierra, 1992, I think mine was.
Would this be a
Ford Probe?
R Escort, or
I don't know if you ever got a Sierra. It might be a Taurus. It could be.
Probably with an S.
Yeah, like that.
That'd be the Escort. It'd be our Escort.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally a white hatchback, like the one you got your mouse on there. Yeah.
Also called the Race Court.
Yeah.
In my high school.
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't even know why I ended up with it, but I started out wanting a Honda CRX. I really wanted a Honda CRX, a VTEC one. And I went to see one, and it was thankfully it was too rusty, because on the way back I must have gone with my dad, I think. I called my mum on the phone. She was like, "Oh, how are you going to insure this?" And I was like, "I thought you told me you were going to insure it and put me on as a named driver." Because back then, it's all changed now, but back then you could put an adult on as the main driver, and put like somebody who'd only just passed their test on as a named
we still do
driver.
that
And you get, and it would be way cheaper. Now they totally don't let you do that anymore.
Yeah.
But she was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I was like, well, it's a good job I didn't buy it then, because I wouldn't have been able to insure it. So then something made me move on to that, and then I did then do a lot of modification to that. I changed the engine out. It was a 1.6. I changed it to a 2 litre. Put a different cam in it, different exhaust, different suspension. And then I forget what happened to it. I think my mum offered me a car that she already owned, and I was like, oh, I'll take that off you. So I think I just broke it apart for spares and scrapped it, which now seems terrible. But yeah, it's not an overly amazing first car. But
No, I don't think any of us.
Insurance means that you just can't get anything good
Was
as a
the
first car.
insurance that much higher on the CRX?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
Just the hatchback?
They're a boy racer car, you know. People
they
are
knew.
racers, as you'd call them.
They know stuff. Like, it takes years for anybody to figure out
Yeah.
here on the insurance side of things, like what.
I mean, that cost me about the same as it cost me to buy the car to insure it for 1 year. But the CRX would have been at least twice what it cost me to buy the car to insure it for 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, so that would have been like £1,500 when I bought it in, I guess 2000 maybe. I'm 40 now, and that would have been 18 when I got that. So.
Wow.
Those always look like they were 2-door hatchbacks that they just stretched.
They threw another door in. Yeah.
Now, the Cosworth one is the one everybody knows about, certainly in Europe. And they did a Sierra RS Cosworth, which was like the touring car, motorsport car, and it's pretty iconic.
So no fun stories about that car? You didn't like jump it or wreck it or?
I can't believe I didn't kill myself in it, put it that way. Yeah, there's no specific stories. I did jump it once and thought I'd smash the sump, a lot of sparks, a lot of noise, but didn't somehow. But no, actually, amazingly, no amazing stories. So sorry to disappoint you. I should make something up.
Is the
I look like
how
that
much
Merc.
Yeah, so
How much are those?
Those are now worth a lot. Like
Really?
that, if that's an RS 500, which was the homologation version for racing, that would be £100,000 now to buy one of those. So $100,000 basically. It's almost 1-to-1 at the moment.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah. So they were used in various touring car, like that, Group A cars, British touring cars, German touring cars.
Huh.
There was a time when almost the whole British touring car grid was made up of Sierras because nobody else could compete. So
Really?
it ended up almost a one-make race. It was the same era as the E30 BMW M3s, so they were the only cars that could really compete with those. So it was, for a while, touring car in Europe was basically Sierras versus M3s.
Huh. Your favorite car movie and why?
Ooh, probably Rush, which, I don't know, it's just the characters, Rush is the James Hunt and, Niki Lauda one.
Yeah.
Really good roles. Everything in it's great, isn't it? It's beautifully shot. The story's amazing. The character is amazing. I suppose being a Brit, I kind of love the James Hunt character. So,
right.
It's a fantastic
It is a good
film.
one. I like that one. Good movie. Best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I can give you a recent one, which was a while ago. One of my clients said you need to get a PA because you need to hand over all the shit you don't need to do to somebody else. And not long after that, we basically employed a receptionist, which took a load of workload off me. And I was really glad we did that. So in the last few years, that was a good piece of advice. But I'm sure there's been some much better ones in the past, but I can't think of them.
If you could go back in time at any point in time, what time would it be, and what would you tell yourself? So it obviously has to be within the last 40 years to tell yourself something. But
just 2019, and I'd say this COVID thing's not going to be that bad.
that's a great one. That's a really good one.
Because nobody
That's
knew.
the first time I've heard somebody go. Because you're
Hit
right.
the stock market hard like June 2020.
Just carry on going to work.
Yep, it's no big deal. Yeah, here's a couple of companies you might want to think about investing in.
Yes. Put your money in Pfizer and just carry on working.
I would probably have a lot less gray hair if I took that advice. Yeah.
I think that's one of the best answers we had in the 60 episodes. Oh, really good. What's in your pocket right now?
Phone and wallet.
You're traveling, so not really bunch of cool things.
No.
Yeah. I'm just.
I say best SEMA story.
I've got
but
one
that
for
doesn't
you.
Really apply.
All right.
What was your first car?
My first car. It's technically the Ford Probe. Yes, it's a supercar.
Show me what that looks like in the States, because we had a Ford Probe in the 90s, and it was.
You've seen what a Ferrari looks like, right?
I can't use I can't use the words that we would generally use to describe it.
It's Ford's version of a Ferrari.
Put it this way: we would say probe drivers are, let's say, wrong-uns. Not wanting to be too specific.
That would be it right there.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. Wow. Yeah, that is pretty much up there in the UK as a car you wouldn't entrust your children to the driver of. Put it that way.
Lives true. Lives true.
It's the first derogatory thing I've ever heard said.
Yeah,
about
I've never heard anybody say bad about a probe.
Were they genuinely respected over here?
Not
No.
really.
Oh, thank God.
We built them up into something.
Josh is convinced it was the bridge between the Ford GT40 and the new Ford GT.
Yeah,
it was Ford's like 80s supercar.
Yeah, almost that. Yeah.
The actual real first car was a 1976 Ford F100 long wheelbase pickup truck.
See, to me, that is cool, but I guess over here, it's literally the most common car there is. So.
It was a long wheelbase, and it was brown on brown two-tone.
That's good.
My granddad's. I learned to drive at 13. So it was. I learned to drive in that. Tossed me the keys and said, "Go figure it out." He lived out in the rural area and had land. So
see, right now though, that is genuinely, to me, super cool. Like, especially the brown on brown. That's like the best bit.
Yeah, me at 16 when he says, "Hey, you learn to drive in it. This is how you get around." I was like, "This sucks."
Not cool.
Yeah,
it's like you guys have been doing some C10 builds for a while now, haven't you? And that's you see, that must be a car that was incredibly uncool for a long while. I mean, there's so many of them, and that was one of the cars we kept seeing when we were driving around, just in people's backyards.
C10s have always had
because they did so many more short beds in C10s than they did in Fords. So many more C10 short beds, and guys that got a short bed, they usually had them as like more sport trucks, right? That was before sport truck was a thing. Bit. So they would have that they were cool. Even the 4-wheel drive, like a all black, late 70s 4-wheel drive C10. That dude was king shit. Like that's a badass. And they were cool back then. But the Fords not so much because they didn't do as many. They were more work trucks. Fords were like, that's where that stigma kind of came from in that marketing thing of Fords were, hard working, tough trucks or whatever. And then the Chevy was kind of more of like for the shinier, dressier kind of guy and stuff. But the C10 was always cool. The Ford, I will do a 76 Ford, a truck at one. I'll have one just because of the memories and the nostalgic part of it. But it won't be a long bed, and
it won't be brown on brown.
It probably will be brown on brown. That'll be the one thing.
I want to do it. We've never done a truck build, and I'd like to. We've got there's quite a few in the UK, like obviously nothing like there is here, but there's quite a few have found their way over there, American trucks. Yeah. So we need to do one at some point.
How's the C10 scene over there?
It's there's a few, like it's niche, but because of the likes of what you guys and similar people are doing, it's rubbed off over in the UK. So there's a scene, definitely, yeah. Like there's quite a few old F100s and D100s, and there's later stuff. It's just quite a niche scene. That's all.
Right.
Has the patina stuff caught on over
there?
there?
Totally, yeah. I've got there's a mate of mine down the road from where we are who's just constantly building like hot rod trucks, and he's gone through they're all patina things. He did is it a COE? I don't know if you say that or
cab over.
Yeah, he did one of those recently. They're all like air ride, custom chassis. He's been doing them with like Cummins engines in them. He did. I think he's just got a C10, but he's definitely done a C10, like a F100, COE. Yeah, like there's a scene for it. It's just small.
Where y'all are at specifically with your shop, are you in the more rural area, or are you like big city?
We're kind of amazingly, we've got the best of both. We are in a rural area, but we're really close to some really good major road links. So in the UK, you've got like the M1. That's like the main motorway to the east side of the country. The M6 is the main motorway to the west. And then you've got joining them, the M69 in the Midlands. And we're like right in the middle of that. So we're like the best location in the country for
stuff.
people from anywhere getting to us. But we are like, we're on a farm, like a few miles out. Well, we're like a mile out of a little tiny village on a farm. So it's a good location. We're unfortunately at that point now where we really need a bigger place, and we've now got all the units within the building we're in. There's another building, but at the moment there's no sign that that's going to become available. So we're in that awkward point where we know we need to move, but the idea of moving to another site is just like, I want to just block it out of my mind, even though I know I want to do it.
Is there any room to add on where you're at?
Maybe, but we don't own it. We rent it. So we're in with the guy who owns it used to farm it. He farmed it until like they had this thing in the UK, foot and mouth disease, that got all the cattle herds, and he had to get rid of his herd. And at that point, he converted it to industrial use. Now we get on really well with the guy, and I think selling the place is on the cards. So we're thinking, we'd love to buy it. But he's kind of dragging his feet a bit, so we don't want to push him too hard. But at the same time, we kind of need answers because
Well, Callum, it's been awesome, man. I appreciate you making the short trip over here.
4,000 miles.
Yeah, 4,000 miles for this. I'm glad you got to see the shop and Chris show you around, and it was good sitting down and talking too, and getting a little bit of that mentality. It shows that at the end of the day, we're all car guys and think.
Yeah, it's been amazing to be here. It's no exaggeration to say that since 2013, you guys have been the number one company that I've looked at to go, we need to be doing that. So it's great to be here.
You got to find better heroes.
Now I'm in that weird position where some people are saying that about us now, and I'm like, we're just kind of building cars in a shed.
It all comes full circle, man. It always comes full circle. You got obviously the right mentality in this little conversation that we've had. You can kind of tell that, and that's at the end of the day, that's all that matters. You take care of the customer, do what you say you're going to do, continue to be better every day the next day, and everything else falls into place.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Big thanks again to Callum. Remember, you can learn more about RetroPower by checking out their Instagram at RetroPowerCars. Be sure to follow Callum on Instagram at his own personal one at RetroPower_Cal. Thanks again for listening to Oil and Whiskey with the Roadster Shop and IRONCLAD Original. If you like the show, what do?
Leave a rating or comment down below.
That's right. We'll see you again next week. Phil nailed it.
Smooth.